All righty. Good morning, everybody. For those of you on the West Coast, it's just past 6:30. For those of you on the East Coast, it's 9:30. Happy President's Day and happy Monday. Lynn Westover. I'm the executive advisor for the Recon Sniper Foundation, welcoming you to the President's Day two-gun match. So, we're going to be having a few guests on, get you guys a chance to see some of the action and just check out some of the things that are going on with Team RSF. So here we go. All right, so with me I got Staff Sergeant Alex Goking. You're the team lead actually for the Marine Corps shooting team for your guys' section, right? Or what's your role exactly? I don't want to screw it up.
I'm the oncoming three-gun team staff NCOIC. I'm replacing Gunnery Sergeant Matt Gunlock, who's on his way out. He's transitioning. So we're doing our turnover right now. And I got a couple pretty next level shooters in charge of that I had to really stay on my toes just to make sure they don't beat me, which is not always successful.
Well, hey, Alex, before we get going into what's going on this morning with the team and in the two-gun match, you mind telling everybody a little bit about, first of all, your background, what got you into shooting, and then how you were able to go from your MOS, because probably a lot of people don't realize exactly how it works getting into the Marine Corps marksmanship programs and specifically the actual competition team. So if you wouldn't mind talking about that, that would be great.
Oh, sure. So I started shooting as a kid. I was born in New York, Buffalo, not city. I went back to the Philippines, family stuff, and that was when I was introduced to IPSC, or International Tactical Recruiting Confederation. And I shot my first match sometime in high school, and I was like, all right, cool, that's like the only sport I want to do now. I can't throw a ball, let alone catch one. So did that for a while, went to school, I did some college, couldn't afford it for a while, came back, enlisted, because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try something different. And shot a local match as Lance Corporal, and I haven't stopped since. And in 2018, I decided to go super hard in the paint after coming off of the MU. And it's just been my thing. It's both fun, and there's a very strong emotional reason why I do it. It's just something that gets me. And so I competed heavily, and typically to get on the Marine Corps shooting team, you have to shoot the Marine Corps matches. They used to be called division matches, now they're called mixed Marine Corps marksmanship competitions. You got to do well there, and then you get invited on the team. You get a summer period where you kind of it's almost like a selection process. We give you a summer to compete with the team, and then we figure out okay, is this guy a decent shooter? But most importantly, is this guy going to be able to communicate and instruct? So it's there's almost a level of blackballing. If we see you as somebody would probably rub somebody the wrong direction in a future match, and it could be anybody from Lance Corporal to the Chief Warrant Officer 5, then we're probably not too keen having you. And competitive experience is a big thing. Competitive experience to get on the team. We only get 3 years, so we need people who are okay, cool. We don't have to start from scratch. Let's get you even further now. And that's how to get on the team. And it's a wonderful place. I'll tell you that.
So that it was interesting. Some of the things that you talked about as far as the experience that they require to be on the team. I think that's one of the big misconceptions that that people have in general about things within not just the Marine Corps, I think just in the military services in general, but like to me it's comparable, such as like being a scout sniper in the Marine Corps. People hear the word or term sniper and they're like, oh, sniper, and this guy's taking shots from, or gal is taking shots from, thousands of meters away, and that's all they do. And shooting is just a small part of that. And I think the same thing with what you were just talking about, like the expectation is, well, you could be the best shooter in the world, but if you don't have a personality, and the whole point of the shooting team is to further the institutional knowledge within the Marine Corps specifically about shooting sports and how to combine the I guess the permissiveness of a competition atmosphere, because let's be clear here, like whether you're shooting on the range for qualification or you're shooting for competition or high level competition, it's still not combat, but the point of it is to use those skills to increase your lethality, right? So when you bring up some of the teaching aspects of what you guys do, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think marksmanship is, from my experience and from what I've seen, it's not something where you can read off of the script and expect everybody to get it, right? It's like you can't necessarily give somebody, you can give somebody a workout plan to go to the gym and stuff, but if you're trying to get that guy to be like a next level athlete, it's a little bit harder than that, right? Shooting, there's a lot of fine motor movement, especially with pistol, distance rifle, reloading a shotgun. There's a lot of things that go on, both on the surface and mentally, right? The mental side is probably the hardest part to teach, because every shooter speaks their own mental language, right? For one person, grabbing a pistol and pressing the trigger straight to the rear can sound that's what that's how you read it off. But to a shooter, that could mean something completely different mentally. Like, I know my mental language is completely non-verbal. It's like when I tell myself to press the trigger a certain manner for a certain target difficulty, it's like, okay, you do this and you do that, right? And that's not a good way to teach that. So you got to dig into the shooter. Like, what's he thinking about? What's she thinking about? What's going on in their heads? And you want to figure out what their mental language might look like, and then try to speak to them through that. And that's also another product that we kind of delivered. We spent lots of hours on the range. We go to matches, and they're significantly stressful events if you're trying to win. And well, from our experience in trying to break through plateaus, trying to get to that next level, we were able to really dig into the shooter's head and be like, okay, now what is the fastest way to get the shooter to be as good as he can be, or as she can be? So that's it's a very subjective thing. It's really hard to teach. On our team, it's really hard to instruct instructors. We kind of provide the shooters an opportunity to learn how to be instructors by learning about themselves and interacting.
So when here's a question for you. I'm just curious, being a formal school instructor myself and a platform instructor, do they also put you guys through FSIC to do these teaching things?
No. Recently, there hasn't really been a need for it. I couldn't tell you why, but it just seems that a lot of people who end up on the team, that's also part of the selection process. And hate to say it, but a lot of people who end up on the teams tend to have a natural ability to instruct, and we also give each other a lot of feedback. Like, we're pretty brutal with each other, and I'm sure your guys' community is a lot more brutal, and criticizing each other's POIs, criticizing each other's performances, criticizing each other when we chew with our mouths open, like everything. It's there's a lot of it's a constant feedback loop, and we're always looking to improve each other. And in the greater scheme of things, a lot of us do this whenever we instruct. Right, half the year we go compete in outside competitions. The other half we instruct and run Marine Corps competitions. A lot of us are just naturally invested in the shooter. Because one, we believe in what we do tremendously, and we're invested in the shooter. So we need to see an explicit and objective improvement in the shooter. And I think once with that like sort of like emotional investment, everything else just kind of follows.
Well, and I think as you're talking about that, I was kind of thinking a little bit about it. I think that actually might be that aspect of training might be something, and this is some of that criticism coming in, that might be some of the things that are actually missing from a formal school instructor program.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different, I would say, I guess the basics that would be required to be a trainer, a coach, an instructor, whatever term you want to use, are there, as far as like, even understanding what kind of a learner you're dealing with and what's your instructional style, so on and so forth. But there are, you do see differences in a classroom environment versus the outdoor classroom or the range. And those are things to be, I think those would be additional aspects to be cognizant of, but I don't know if they currently do it now, but I know that wasn't really incorporated when I did some of those courses, except for maybe Marine Combat Instructor course. That's where you're doing stuff also on the ranges and things like that. But again, you're getting so much stuff thrown at you. You're sipping at a lot of different pools with a coffee straw, so to speak. So, okay. Well, so what's the plan? Let's talk a little bit about the 2-gun match itself. What exactly, for those who are not familiar with what a 2-gun match is or how that works or what the rules are, things like that, what do we have going on with that?
So, first off, that you do use 2 guns. Typically not at the same time, but like there is going to be on the stages they're designed to where. From talking to Joey Rossetti, he's the one running the match right now. He's got a bunch of wonderful dudes helping him out down there. Each stage, he designed them to where you'd have to transition from rifle to pistol at some point. Now, it's not necessarily the full, when we think about transitions, we're thinking about, all right, cool, rifle goes dead, got a pistol. But it's a competitive environment. Safety is absolutely paramount. So there are ways where the stages are designed where you can safely sling or stow a rifle and then switch to your pistol, right? Like, I know a lot of people, there's a lot of arguments out there about oh, well, you wouldn't put your rifle away or put it on the table. It's like, no, but then this is safety, right? There's a lot of things that can go on when you have a loaded firearm, even when you flip it on safe and, toss it off to the side. There's a lot of things that can happen. That safety does not take a lot of poundage to disengage. People have tourniquets. People have stuff. Tackle pouches have these little adjustment thingies. It can get pretty crazy, and it's really not worth it. In the greater scheme of things, I personally don't believe there's a huge you don't lose a lot of training value, right? I will say that transitioning from a rifle to pistol is largely a dry fire. Any weapons manipulation is a dry fire based thing, and as long as you evaluate yourself, you'll find out that it just comes out. So let me focus on hitting something far away now and faster. So the match is going to be scored using time plus, if I remember right. Talking to Joey and the other guys, it means your total time on the stage, after deducting your penalties, is your total time. And the guy at the end of the stage who has the fastest time wins that stage in his division. And there's going to be movement. There's going to be a little bit of distance. There are going to be some interesting challenges, and they're going to be running that.
So let's talk about penalties or deductions, right? So. Can you give me some examples of what that would be or what that would include?
Sure. So with time plus, typically, right, it depends on who's running the match, but on average, if you completely if you hit a target insufficiently, so failure to neutralize, like you hit it once, but the second shot didn't hit it anywhere, then you get 5 seconds added onto your time. And if you completely forget about a target, you get 10 seconds added onto your time. Right. If you if you hit like what we call no shoots or hostage targets, you get 5 to 10 seconds deducted, added onto your time, right? So all of these are meant to incentivize not doing any of the above, right? If you're trying to win the match, you don't want to have penalties. And on the flip side, if you do get a penalty, like how good are you at staying in the game and not freaking out or getting pissed off at yourself or texting your homies that you're upset, like so.
I have a friend. I'm not going to throw him under the bus because that just wouldn't be the right thing to do. But I specifically he shared the video with me because of the work I do with regard to human behavior, advanced critical thinking, decision making in critical situations for law enforcement, military, and security. Mm-hmm. And he was going through a stage, and there was. I mean, this thing was a monster of a stage. I mean, it was a stage within a series of several stages, right? Oh. And it was in the video, when you play the video real time, mm-hmm. It is such a slight hesitation that it's almost imperceptible. Mm-hmm. But he came up on a no-shoot target, and for whatever reason, he hesitated, but there was something about the target because it was very close to other targets that were shoot targets. Only difference being is this one was a no shoot. So it was a very subtle difference. And he was in his bubble in the zone. He hesitated and then he shot. And then you saw him after he shot and then started moving on to other targets. You saw him slow down for a second, and you can actually hear his breathing change. You could hear him going through a little bit of a catecholamine rush. Mm-hmm. the chemicals that we talk about that impact the brain. Everybody's familiar with like adrenaline, stuff mm-hmm. like that, but there's several other chemicals that are involved with that. And so you could hear it affecting his respiratory rate, mm-hmm. which even though you couldn't see him, you could hear the effect it had on him. Mm-hmm. And so we had a big conversation about that. And to understand how much is going through an individual's mind, just working as an individual through some of these. Now, I know some of these other competitions that you guys do, they're like team events as well, where you may have a battle buddy or partner or several people, right? Yes. And so to realize the level of safety that is maintained while at the same time making final decisions as far as what's happening with these targets. I mean, it is... To me, it's an amazing thing to watch, and I'm into shooting myself, but I'm nowhere at all to a competition level like you guys are, or into the things that you guys are doing. But it's pretty amazing to watch. When you're going through your stages, and even before that, because you guys do a lot of visualization and mm-hmm. practice. Yes. In fact, there's another video on our channel with Recon Sniper Foundation where Mike Keeble's going through, like you see him going through his visualization process. Mm-hmm. What's like, how much time and how much effort do you put into that, and how do you see that change as your experience level grows?
Okay, so what I usually do is I start with the Marine Corps planning process. I'm just gonna, not at all.
Oh man.
This is my problem.
The 4 people that were watching just about jumped off.
Yeah, pretty sure. So first off, right, a match, and there are 2 elements, and I'll geeking out about this, right? There are 2 things that are going on in a match. When you have an environment where there's a substantial amount of stress, unless you really don't want to be there. So that being, and the balance of speed and accuracy, right? You can't just be accurate, you can't just be fast. You got to be a good amount of both if you want to be successful, if you want to finish stage, right? And the interesting thing when you give a shooter, like for example, time plus and hit factor, right? These 2 scoring methods. When you tell a shooter, all right, you don't have a time limit, but whatever time you end up with is your final time. So it's like everything down to like a 10th to 100th of a second matters, right? There's this weird things start to happen, and if you listen to a lot of PRS, USPSA, 3-gun, IDPA, and field challenge shooters, they'll tell you as soon as that buzzer goes off, everything just their plan, their ability to shoot goes out the window, right? And we all joke about it all the time. But that's a very interesting thing, since because what that means is when that buzzer goes off, everything that you have, or a majority of the things that you have, are subconscious. I will say now that when balancing speed and accuracy, and you have to go through a process of, all right, slow, steady squeeze, front side focus, so on and so forth. You're that target's gone. Like it feels like a moving target. And we actually got Staff Sergeant Haynes coming on. Yeah, he'll get there. So a lot of crazy things happen, and a majority of your ability has to come from your subconscious. Interesting thing is, if it was never in your subconscious to begin with, your subconsciousness, it's probably not going to come out very well in the match, especially when you're trying to balance that speed and accuracy. So everything you bring to the match has to be worked on, prior to, right? Something about preparation and success, right? When we're at the match, it's too late to think about those fundamentals. It's too late to be like, okay, I'm going to make sure I point my mag well towards my belt. It's too late for that. Everything you do at a match is pretty much just planning and employing your abilities, right? It's almost as if you take a notch higher, and from the tactical level to a higher level, right? Where you have to plan your stage out, committed to your short to mid-term memory, all right? I think it's short term. So that's the hardest work we do at a match. We when we go through a stage, we go, okay, here's your 4 to 5 minute walkthrough. All right, walkthrough. We go through as much detail as we can, right? We go through each part of the stage. This is what I'm going to do when I get here. When I get over on this corner, I'm going to do this. There's a port. I'm going to crouch down, and when I dump my shotgun and grab a rifle, I'm gonna use this hold on this target and using this shooting position. So we burn that in hardcore over and over and over and over again. And what I typically do is when it's my turn, or when I'm the guy after the dude who's shooting right now, I'm all just going over my plan. And by the time I get on the stage and they give me the make ready, cool, I made ready. And when the RO holds the timer to my head, are you ready? As soon as that happens, I try to dump everything out of my head, just completely go blank, right? There's a lot of Eastern wisdom saying something about no mind, or something like that. Like literally it. Like you want to get all that stuff out so that all the cogs and all the gears are free to turn in their own rhythm, right? So as soon as that goes off, the perfect outcome is literally it feels like you hit the play button in your body, and your subconscious do everything else. I was just talking to a shooter who shot one of the West Coast matches. He's on the reserve shooting team. Stats on the race. He talked about a stage where he barely remembers the fine details. All he remembers is just going, and it just happened. And that's an example of when your subconscious takes over and your skills are allowed to go out there. Now, I'm gonna throw a question back to you, Wayne. What value do you think that has?
Well, so there's a couple things there that I could probably break down a little bit deeper as far as what's going on within the process of the brain. So understanding that when you look at the main parts of our brain and where our gross motor skills relies within that cerebellum, right? That's balance, gross motor, which it's important to hone those things because what you're talking about with the automaticity, which is that muscle memory, right? And there's two ways you can get a muscle memory. You can get it through repetition and a certain amount of hours of doing the exact same thing over and over again, or you can also associate a memory and emotion link to it. So, right down to when you were talking about okay, here I'm going to get into the crotch versus I'm going to take a knee here or whatever. You're actually assigning sights, sounds, smells, those feelings, those senses, along with what that visual picture is for you to do what you're doing. The real fine characteristics, that fine motor control, is what resides within our prefrontal cortex, right? Our neocortex. And that's where things like speech also come from, your ability to multitask, so your polyphasic skill. And on average, a human being can handle up to 7 channels, plus or minus 1 or 2. In extreme stress or boredom situations, that drops to 3, which is why you have they don't use tap, rack, bang anymore for like law enforcement, but you have tap, rack, reassess, right? You have 911, you have stop, drop, and roll, all those other things. So what you're describing, what you have to do is taking that short-term working memory, building it into long-term memory, is all the prep and practice you're talking about leading up to it, so that those fine motor skills become autonomic, build that automaticity. Autonomic functions are like breathing, blinking, so on and so forth. So the value is extremely strong, right down to, hey, what's this going to feel like? And every other professional sport to that level of competition, where you're talking about milliseconds make the difference. And like, look at the Olympics, milliseconds are making the difference between somebody standing on the gold medal platform versus the silver or bronze, or not even placing for a medal, right? That's exactly why you see pro football players, like, to our benefit, they'll throw down the 10-yard line for the first down. What that is, those guys don't see that. That's because when they're at practice, they're doing those, okay, first 10, 12, cut, 10, move, turn, catch, and you're seeing them literally like a Picasso. That's a baseball thing, right? The pitcher who's a Picasso, they can throw that ball anywhere within the strike box, right? So that's the way I look at it for you guys. Those targets that you're moving on in the stage, that's your picture frame. And so you're going to put that round anywhere within that picture frame where you want it. And you're visualizing that while you're also, walking and chewing gum with that. So yeah, I could wax poetic on a bunch of that stuff for a long time.
I enjoyed that. Well, that's interesting note. We got a CQB school instructor here.
Yeah, we should see if Matt wants to weigh in on that. So I'll go ahead and add him in there. Hey Matt, how you doing, bud?
How's it going? I finally figured out the computer. I had to reset 3 times and open it up. And
yeah, I saw you popping in and out of there, but once you get it figured out, it works out. So Matt, how about this is the first time I've met you, so it's nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. And
thanks for taking time to jump on with us on your President's Day and on an early Monday morning. I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute, just so that you could kind of introduce yourself and talk a little bit about, what you do, and then we can, kind of add some of the thoughts. I don't know if you could hear some of what we were talking about before we brought you in, but we'll get you caught up on that and maybe have you weigh in on some of the things that Alex was bringing up.
Yeah. So I'm Matt Haynes. I'm currently a staff sergeant down at Security Forces Training Course, or as everybody knows, like the FAST Schoolhouse. Everybody in the Marine Corps loves that one. I was FAST back in 2012, kind of did my rotation there, went to 3-6 for a few years. Then when I was in 3-6, I was like, the line company thing's not really for me. I was tired of babysitting, so ran the sniper and doc, went to state platoon, went through school, passed, came to 17, was there for a couple of years, and then through turn of events, my wife's active duty, so she got stationed up here in Norfolk, came back and was an instructor at BSG or CIFTIC for a couple months, then went over to CQB, was instructor in CQB for a year and a half, and then became the course chief for CQB. So I was writing the POI, the handbook, stuff like that, all the references, and then somehow rotated out again, and now I'm running a team of instructors for the Security Force Training Course. Yep, that's kind of like my whole little rotation.
Awesome. So right as you were jumping on, Alex and I were talking a little bit about, and really it's not just for competition, because I know even when I would go out as a reconnaissance Marine and a force recon Marine and do missions, we would do our mission planning and our mission prep, but an important part of that was actual visualization on the ground, especially, you had 3 of the most dangerous times in any mission: is insert, extract, or your exfiltration, and actions on the objective. And so it was key for that mission success to be able to visualize exactly what you were going to do for actions on the objective, especially if you were doing some kind of leaders recon or something like that, because now it's only maybe 2 or 3 of you that are there. And, kind of got a little bit into the what's actually going on with your body and your brain a little bit as you're visualizing through these different stages, so on and so forth. Just wondering if you wouldn't mind weighing in for you and your experience of the things that you've seen, like what parts were maybe key to that visualization process, and how much time comparatively to other things did you dedicate to that?
So actually, we have a whole class on this in the CQB course. We just call it the mindset class, kind of like, big idea. We kind of go into more of like the body's responses that you can't necessarily control, but that you can like train to the point where at least you understand what's going on, so you can recognize the facts. So like our big thing is, you're not going to stop adrenaline from hitting your system. You're not going to stop your body from shaking. You're not going to stop auditory exclusion or your tunnel vision or anything like that, because your body's going to automatically pump blood in your ears, which forces it in other parts. Like, you can't stop your body from reacting the way it wants to react. So our big thing is noticing when that happens, and then understanding, basically not to fight through it, but to deal with it and to use it basically to your advantage. So for our auditory exclusion, we do a lot of live fire shoot houses. So our big thing is we push students to wear electronic ear pro, because you can turn it up really loud and it kind of cuts out the background noise, and you can actually hear people talking, as opposed to just like, oh, everything's muffled and I have styrofoam stuck in my ears, so I can't hear anything anyway. So that's like a big thing that helps out. It's little things, right? Technology.
Or those of us that just didn't wear ear pro.
Yeah. Or you just hear it ringing all the time, and you're like, oh, ringing means I'm doing well because I'm still alive. Yeah.
But I can't hear you, Matt, past this tinnitus that I have, that the VA says is a pre-existing condition, but I digress.
Yeah. That's really kind of what we push for. We just push for an understanding of how things are going to affect your body, and appropriate responses, or like how you're going to react to it, because everybody reacts like a little bit differently. So it's just kind of what we push.
Yeah, Cody's in the chats, and as soon as I said that, he's like, right? He's like, can I get an amen? But well, no, it's funny. Like, so I want to talk a little bit about tunnel vision versus focus lock and perceptual narrowing. So probably one of the biggest things that I saw, I'm not saying I'm a part of the old and the bold crew. I know guys who are part of that crew, but I was kind of in that transition time. Like, I saw specifically for the Marine Corps, where we went from literally using film cameras for doing missions, to then transitioning to digital cameras to take digital pictures. And everybody's like, are you kidding me? But that time period wasn't that. It was a pretty interesting like jump, right? But talking about your workspace and your bubble, right? So I don't think people realize that, like, your functional field of view, right? So functional field of view is an angular depiction in degrees of what you're actually visually perceiving, right? And so for average, you have differences between males and females, which is one of the reasons why I think that women actually, in a lot of cases, are better shooters than men for anthropologically, like biologically, right? And that's because of their functional field of view. Men have a 6-degree functional field of view. Women have an 11-degree functional field of view, which is almost double. But when you break that down, it's like a quarter at an arm's length. So everything else all around that is visual or perceptual field. That's why, not only like, hey, I'm in my bubble, I'm manipulating my firearm, I also understand an extended appendage is a lost appendage, right? So I need to bring that in close so I can be in my workspace while still maintaining eyes on what's going on around me. Or things like the search and assess. It's the funniest thing. I love seeing it on a range when, as soon as you inject that stress of time, yeah, and it's like, whew, whew, and you're like, what did you see, bro? What were you looking at? Right? And it's like, what do you mean? It turns into a check in the box, right? Versus like, no, rapid retraction. I have positive control of my system, right? I'm identifying, do I need to make sure it's still in operation? And I'm looking for good guys or bad guys, because if I don't break that focus lock. So focus lock is like, boom, light motion edges, rod cells in my eyes, boom, I react and I look at it. And now I'm going through my OODA loop, right? I observe, I orient, I decide, I act. Some things start to happen within the brain because you don't see with your eye, you see with your brain, right? Those chemicals you're talking about, like adrenaline, noradrenaline, epinephrine, cortisol, dopamine, serotonin, all those amino acids from tyrosine, when they impact my prefrontal cortex, they also impact my visual cortex. And if I have enough of them, that tunnel vision, what starts to occur is all that visual or perceptual fill of what I think it is that I'm seeing in my periph starts to go away, because my brain is only focusing on that 6 degrees. And for those that have actually had that happen to them, it's pretty frightening, because you're like, what's going on here, right? And it's a visual. The easiest way I can express it to people when I'm teaching about it is, it's the visual version of auditory exclusion. Auditory exclusion is the same way. It's that the sound goes away. The sound still happens, kind of like the whole, if the tree falls in the woods, nobody's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Yes, it makes a sound. You don't register it, right? The sound is occurring, but your brain is tuning that information out because your channel capacity is exceeded. You're being impacted by catecholamines. You're having the combat cocktail, as we call it. And so your ability to push through that stuff goes back to training and experience in the visualization, and how do you move past that? So let me ask you this, from a training standpoint, in the schoolhouse, I'm sure you see a lot of people react differently the first time they're making entry, hitting their dominating position. Average, how many times does it take for a person to go through those first couple of clears, or even the first couple of rooms maybe, before they start to, I don't want to say become more comfortable, but I guess become more attuned to what it is that they're specifically doing with that? Because I think that directly relates to what Alex was talking about earlier, as far as I'm visualizing and prepping for my stage when I'm at the competition.
I mean, I think so. Typically for the CQB class, there's 24 students, so it's a really good ratio. It's like max 1 to 4 student instructor ratio, plus a couple extras that are like overseeing the students. So we definitely have a lot of hands-on time with them. I mean, honestly, when it's talking about reps, it really depends on the students, because I don't care that you can do it. I care that you can do it right. And so some students, it could be like their second time. Sometimes it could be, God rest their soul, like 50, 55, 60 times. Like it's just on and on and on. And then still it's going to be like close, but close is 95% of that wall instead of 75% of that wall. And since you're 95%, well, now you're in the other guy's sector of fire. So I don't really harp on, hey, this is a specific spot you need to be, but I care that like you understand why you need to be in that spot, or like why other people in the room are expecting you to be there, like why your job is this. Yeah, I really think it just depends on the students, is like how many reps. But I mean, the first level 2 match I shot was Immortal this year, and I think this is a pretty good example, because the first couple stages, like I'm taking 3-4 mics a stage, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I was just so gassed up, ready to roll, that like by the time I hit stage 5 and 6, I just kind of like settled into my groove, and then I was like, wow, I don't suck that bad. Okay, that's a little bit better. But like the first couple stages of the day, like I was so gassed up, ready to go, just everything was popping in my brain, and like in reality, I was just putting so much stimulus into my head, like I couldn't process what was going on in front of me. And like I like to think that, not necessarily a competitive shooter, but like I'm a pretty experienced shooter, at least like by Marine Corps standards.
Oh, you're pretty competitive.
Which is a whole separate thing. Like Marine Corps experienced shooter compared to the civilian world, or like worlds apart, which is kind of surprising to a lot of civilians when they find out that, like, if you go to a range like once a week, you're shooting more than 95% of the Marine Corps. Yeah, or even dry fire.
Well, so logistically, it's difficult. But that's why you see in a lot of the higher tier level groups, they, when it comes to shooting, like shooting is such a small part of what they do, but in order to make sure that that small part, when it's ready to go, it is ready to go. You see where they have their ranges and stuff are right there. They'll be doing whatever training they're doing. They're like, okay, on lunch break, I'm going to go down and send a few volleys, drop a couple mags, or even, Alex brought up earlier, dry practice. Some of the stuff that's come out now for doing dry practice, even in your home, like I'm getting ready to pull the trigger, pun intended, on, getting one of those dry practice units. Because for me, I don't get the opportunity or time to go and shoot. And with this whole pandemic thing, ammo has also become an issue. So, but I still want to keep my skills up. And, I've identified the best way that I can do that is through dry practice or dry fire. And I know there's two different schools of thought on what the difference between those terminologies, but whatever. But yeah, it's funny how people do take for granted what that's like. And, it kind of, as you were talking about that, it reminded me too, like the average person going to the range, we'll say in the military, regardless of your MOS, and this has just been my experience in the Marine Corps, is like the safety aspect is beaten into your head so much, which is good. No one should ever die in training, but a lot of our training is inherently dangerous. So you need to have that level of respect there and awareness of what's going on around you. That being said, this is a question for the both of you. Do you feel that sometimes that it's almost a little bit over the top to where people are so focused on they're so worried that this thing is going to magically go off and hurt somebody that they're not actually able to, their channel capacity is basically so over exceeded on worrying about that they're not actually able to focus on what it is that they're doing so that they can be competent on the range. Like, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Let Matt go first.
Okay. Yeah. I think a lot of it goes into range personnel or instructor abilities and like comfortability. So I know for me, like when they first show up, so I'll take a CIFTIC student that has never shot a pistol or maybe even seen one in real life before. And then an hour and a half, I'm qualifying them on CPP, like real scenario. We had this past course, a couple guys had to make up training. I had an hour and a half with this kid that's never even pulled the trigger on a pistol. And an hour and a half later, he shot, was it like a 340 on CPP? So he's like a sharpshooter, but like nothing crazy. Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of work, but essentially I think it comes down to range personnel experience and like their level of experience too, because a lot of times like the letter ranges for annual rifle qual, I mean, you're putting 300 people out there on the line at a time, and the coaches are like, nothing against coaches, but most of the time they didn't pick to be there. Like they're about to get out or something else. So like, I think annual rifle qual range is a little bit different than what I would like to think of as like a Marine Corps range. For us, I mean, it kind of blows a student's mind when you give them 25 rounds, put them on the line, be like, hey, your target's over there, shoot. And they're like, what do I need to shoot? Like, whatever you need to work on, man. Like, we're doing strong hand, support hand, whatever it is. Like, what do you think you need to work on? And run your own drills. Here's a shot timer if you need to. But, like, I can say targets. I can have them face, whatever you need. Just let me know what you need to work on. And they're just kind of like, okay,
I don't even know what I need to work on.
Yeah, man, like, go ahead. I think that has definitely gotten in the way. I think it, again, like you were saying, safety is important on the front end, make sure everybody understands everything. But I mean, we're on ballistically walled short bays that you only shoot one direction. And I mean, at that point, it's like a 1-to-2 coach to shooter ratio, like super safe scenario, like work on what you need to work on. So yeah, I definitely think there are some areas where the safety is harped so hard that it's hindering a shooter's ability to really, improve their own skills on what they need to work on, since live fire is so difficult to work on. But again, I also understand why, unlike the letter ranges for annual rifle qual or something, like why the coaches are, super, super, super uptight. Yeah.
Oh, hold up. Looks like we got the stream. Hey.
All right. Nice.
All right.
Well, to be continued on that note, because I know Alex probably, so just remember, Alex, what you were going to say with regard to that. But we got Joey in here, so I'm going to add him in.
Hey, good
Joey,
morning, everybody.
What's going on, buddy?
So
you got Lynn, Alex, and Matt here. So are you guys getting ready to run a stage?
So we're on the 0 stage. That's also stage 1. So I think I can. Whoop, nope. I did not practice this, so just hang on.
That's okay.
You can see we got 2 shooters. That's Jardin and Riley finishing up 0.
If you go into your on there, there's a section for camera. When you get to your settings for camera, you can actually turn to rear facing camera.
Huh.
But it might be hard to see.
All right. Look at me doing what we got.
There you go.
There it is.
Yep. See, now he's got it.
You guys
Perfect.
see that?
Look at that.
Yep. Sure can.
You good?
Yeah, we're good. Are you good?
So we're wrapping up 0. You can see we're here. We got Haley Strategic with us.
Oh, snap.
We're getting ready to start stage 1. So
Oh, snap. Yo, let's see some of let's see some
I'm
of
not
the
really
other-
too sure how this will work to do like a live feed. It's kind of a bit much.
I think we can, as long as we can see what's going on.
Wait,
we can,
I can't see you guys.
Okay. As long as we can see what's going on, we can literally like that's.
There you are. So yeah, it's kind of, we haven't really started yet, so it's a little much for me.
That's okay. So what
So
we'll
is it
do
okay if I
is-
check back in a little bit later?
Yeah, just
What?
How long from now?
Like, give me like 30 minutes.
30?
15 minutes.
15 works. 15 works.
15, 1-5.
Yep. And when able, let's.
All right, man. I'll talk to you guys then.
so exactly my point. Channel capacity right there, demonstrated live and in color, guys. Right. So you got a guy who's totally comfortable on the range, been to multiple competitions, fully capable of handling stress under pressure. Yet throw one new thing into that equation and the calculus totally changes, and he's like, okay, this is he said it himself, this is a bit much for me, right?
It's just that threshold, knowing your own threshold and where your limit is.
And one thing I wanted to bring up before Alex, before you weigh in on the same things that we were talking about with Matt, one thing that I wanted to throw out there, and I say this all the time when I'm actually teaching in class, talking to students, and it's like there's a couple things that you can take from shooting that you can apply to real life, right? And the one big thing is incremental improvement, incremental change, right? But you have to look at what's your storyboard, what's your story pole, or what's the measuring stick that you're using for that, right? And so the big mistake that people will make is, whether it's in life or in a classroom taking a test, or you're actually on the range shooting, is looking on somebody else's paper, right? Because you can, like, I could be shooting next to Alex, right? And I'll look over at Alex's target, and he's just blown out the whole 10 ring. It looks like a damn rat's nest, right? And I'll be like, damn, Alex, this is, and I'm looking at mine, and it looks like I'm not shooting pistol, I'm shooting shotgun, right? And the thing is, though, is that Alex could be looking at his target, because it's all about that perspective. And even though to me, his target looks great, to him, it's not his best, right? So you have to look at your own incremental change in your own ability and kind of focus on that. And that's just one thing that's kind of stuck with me. And then the other thing is understanding training value, right? And at which point you are actually, you're just throwing rounds away. Like for me, when I go and shoot, if I feel like things are not going the way I want them to go, even in practice, I will download my weapon. I will take a breather from it, and then I'll come back, and then I'll go right back to dry practice again of what it is that I'm trying to achieve, and then I'll put rounds back in the gun. And I think it's one of those things is, when like emotions, things like anger, I'll ask people, like, because I'm looking at it from the aspect of like decision making, and I'll say to them, okay, think of the last time you were on the range, and say you were having a bad day shooting on the range. Did your shooting improve when you start getting angry about the fact that you weren't shooting good? And invariably, every single time, everybody goes, well, no. And it's like, point proven. So there's just a couple of things that kind of came to my mind, just through the course of having the conversation with you guys. So based on some of the stuff that Matt was just talking about, Alex, what were some of your thoughts with regard to all that?
So any conversation that I have with Matt, like it always tends to tangent, and actually what he was saying led to a tangent in my head, but it's still somewhat related, right? We're talking about safety. That the first thing that hit in my head, even though it's not that connected, but it's like, all right, cool. We have like to follow this level of safety, great. Well, you always got to do it. And I started thinking about like the hesitation with shooters, right? There's a lot of hesitation, a lot of reluctance, a lot of just like, read the script, follow the line, walk into the shoot. When it comes to like the actual, let's use the word fundamentals, right? Very heavily debated topic, almost as debated as which latter would not cover, former, all about it. When you always hear, there's no one way to do something, right? That is very true. Although I can say there's a lot more, there are a lot more wrong ways to do something than there are right. From gripping the pistol to pulling the trigger, but I want to focus on one thing so I don't go too far, right? Fundamentals. Everybody talks about the fundamentals, but surprisingly, people don't really agree, right? Some people will say fundamentals are sight picture, trigger press, stance, whatever, right? Some people say, well, fundamentals are iron sights. I'm like, that's sight picture. Like, ACOG is not fundamentals, it's sight picture, And
kind of the tools don't make the carpenter kind of thought process, right?
They don't. Like, people will say like, oh yeah, these, especially the older guys.
That reminds me. Don't let me forget, because I want to bring up things like red dots and pistol shooting, because I do want to touch on that. But keep going. Sorry, just don't let me forget.
I think Matt would be the perfect guy to talk about that. So I'll remember that as well. So fundamentals, right? People always talk about like, oh, cool. Like, yeah, these new Marines need to go back to iron sights. And, like, fundamentals, like, yeah, like you don't really have much of a time limit, right? If I were to take a guy with iron sights, ACOG, all right, you have a time limit, identify your targets, like it gets harder. But that's not my point. I'm going to go about fundamentals, right? All right, cool. 500-yard target, 600-yard target, whatever. Freaking focus on the sights. Freaking get good breathing, press the trigger. Cool. Those are fundamentals, right? Proper fundamentals. When we add in time or speed as a factor, I will argue that the fundamentals need to be looked at slightly different. They're still the same fundamentals, right? Because fundamentals are essentially a set of processes that allow you to, have a desired result. Cool. That is a proper fundamental for that range. If you did the same thing at a 10-yard, 15-yard, 7-yard target, if you did that exact process, I personally would say your fundamentals are off. Because what is the desired outcome? You want to hit that thing right there in front of you. And like I said, not an 03, right? I talk about marksmanship, I don't talk about combat. But I am under the assumption that if the thing is right in front of you, not only do you need to shoot that thing, but you need to shoot that thing right now, right? So,
like right now, like 15 minutes ago.
Don't prep us like freaking don't get into a good sitting position for that, right? So, I would argue that range and the desired outcome is to hit that thing right now. If you're doing a slow, steady trigger squeeze and you're getting a front side focus, your fundamentals are wrong. I would argue the guy who brings up his sights, whether it's a freaking iron sight, whether it's the you're using the bend and aiming method on a powered optic, or just throwing that dot on to the center of the target and pressing that trigger fast, that those are proper fundamentals for that circumstance, right? It's not a black and white thing. It's not absolute, right? Like hell, friggin' if even if we were to narrow it down, right? Pistols, right? It's a difficult thing. Front sight focus, slow steady squeeze to the rear. There are literal competitive shooters who shoot target focus up to and beyond 25 yards. And people are like, oh, he's just point shooting. No, he sees his sights, but his eyes aren't focused on him. And it's just, there's a lot of things that we realize we can actually do, but you have to get yourself to that point and push yourself to really get there. And yeah.
It's funny because actually all of what you were saying just made me think of a few things. Like I remember back in the day when it was only iron sights, and used to have I forget the gunner's name, but he would say, hey, that target is only between 16 and 18 inches away from your face, with talking about that front sight post. Mm-hmm. And I remember very clearly like learning about and understanding scope theory when I went through sniper school and how that changed my world. And I used to think that because you hear the same things like, oh, brilliance in the basics, and the basics are iron sights and so on and so forth. And well, I think you're right. I think that perspective is a little bit off. Like if by saying brilliance in the basics, you're talking about like the same thing as like, for example, land navigation. I have the ability technologically to use a global positioning system, a GPS, right? A plugger. Yep. But I can still land navigate with a compass, a protractor, and a map. I can still terrain associate. I can still do those things. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way. Like, it's good for me to understand that, but I need to be able to do multiple different methods and ways and be good at everything. So kind of like the jack of all trades, master of none. Mm-hmm. And a better way of honing in on that, I remember very clearly after completing sniper school, and I used to think that like, okay, to score really high on, for example, the KD course, table 1 and then table 2, like, it was tough with iron sights. Mm-hmm. Shooting through a scope actually, to me, made it a lot easier to shoot iron sights, because I realized when looking through a scope how unstable I was when I was unstable. When I saw how much movement there was in that reticle, and then I realized that like that was imperceptible to me when I was shooting through iron sights. I was like, sweet, I don't have to worry about anything. I didn't even, there was a couple of qualifications where, because I'm left-handed, but I'm a right-handed shooter. There was a couple of qualifications just to prove a point. I shot the whole thing left-handed, my weak shooting side, just to prove the point. And the point is that like, it is that level of perspective. And I was just teaching a class in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I was talking to a police officer with Scottsdale PD, and he had just gone through the red dot pistol course that they do. And just some of the conversation with him about how much it changed by doing that, changed his concept of pistol shooting, and specifically about aiming. And he's like, yeah, he said, I was so ingrained and drilled into my head, front sight, front sight, front sight, front sight, front sight, that it took me a while to break the whole front sight when, yeah, it's still there because that's my backup for that red dot. But like, no, look at the target. And as soon as you throw it up in the right position, the dot's there, and just pull the trigger till it goes click. But seeing him have that epiphany is the same thing. My sergeant major, my first platoon sergeant, he had something like 250 static line jumps as a parachutist before going to free fall. And again, jumping is jumping. Falling out of an airplane is falling out of an airplane. However, there's still different techniques and methodologies and processes that you do when you're going from, like, say, a static line to free fall parachuting. But he was so ingrained to him, like feet and knees together, tuck the chin. The one thing he couldn't break when he first got to free fall was the tucking of the chin thing. Well, if you tuck your chin when you go off the ramp, it doesn't matter how good the rest of your body position is, just that one thing of having your chin tucked. And he was doing Mr. Toad's Wild Ride for his first like several jumps until he figured out like he had to lift his chin up. So it got So I think that's when you talk about things like training scars, training-isms, I call them corrupt file folders.
Oh.
I think, what you guys are talking about when you're doing brilliance, utilizing brilliance in the basics, and you guys are practitioners of a skill set, you have the ability to take a look at a process and look at the specific task and purpose of I'm shooting in this stage, or I'm clearing this room, or I have this kind of weapon system on me now versus this kind of weapon system, deconstructing that process and focusing on the process of how it works. Because I think you're right. It does totally reshape what are fundamentals.
Yeah, I honestly it expands them, right? Like it puts context into them. And I like what you said about the scope and the irons, because I will say I am one of the hundreds of people who believe that shooting with a red dot on a pistol improved my ability to shoot with iron sights on a pistol. Every rifle match here, I do 1 day irons and 1 day dot. And, I think I'm actually going to pass this to Matt, but I think, we were stuck with a lot of platitudes, almost like our Western Eastern philosophies of if you get good at iron sights, going to a dot gets easier. Or if you learn how to shoot with a stock gun, you're really good at shooting a race gun. These things do not hold very true. I literally had a conversation with a guy. It's like, well, I'm curious why you don't shoot issued pistols more than you shoot your race guns. And then I told him straight up, shooting competition pistols makes me shoot better with a stock M18. I don't touch that thing very often, but when I pick it up, everything just it's easier. And it's weird because face value doesn't make sense. But if you go deeper into training, and now that we understand a lot more on how to program things in your subconscious, so on and so forth, it makes a lot more sense than what you would say. And speaking of, Matt, his unit recently did a. You guys, is that you want to go into that, Matt?
Yeah, about which part?
Red dots.
Oh yeah. All right, sorry, my ADHD brain is going 15 different directions. I'm connecting all the rat trails together, and I'm like, oh, I got to come back to that, and I got to come back to that. Yeah.
Welcome to live streaming.
Yeah. I don't have anything in front of me to write it down, and I have to keep lists or else I get lost. And now I'm thinking about oh, he was talking about doing with iron sights or shooting with iron sights, but my favorite thing was to jump forward and then go to the middle. So the first gun was at sniper school, zeroing with my partner Raymond, and neither one of us, we got to 2 weeks before they sent us to school. I was a sergeant, like a pig, ran the screener, got messed up for a week, but it's me and PFCs, and it just didn't matter at that point. But first time I ever pulled the trigger on a bolt gun was sitting at school on the KD range, and I'm sitting there. I didn't even know what scope tools were. Right? They're like, "Hey, where are your scope tools?" I was like, "What?" Oh, buddy. It's going to be a rough time.
This thing takes tools?
Yeah, I was like, what do you mean tools? They're like, oh, no. I was like,
I can't just turn the little hooey on, the whatnot? And
yeah. They're like, yeah, all right, so zero. And I was like, yeah. So, how do I do it? They're like, just fundamentals. I was like, which ones? All of them. Okay. Let me just jog my memory real fast. I got to shoot more better. I was like, yep. Definitely need to do that. How do I get it? But what I didn't realize is zeroing a rifle, especially a precision rifle. A lot of us didn't realize that if you have the rifle powered up, it's just bouncing just a little bit. So you're trying to time the bouncings. But if you zero at the lowest power, 3, right, or 4, nothing too crazy, you're gonna have a lot better group because you're not trying to chase the reticle dancing around. Well, for me, it was the same thing. I just recently started shooting red dots, and actually the first match I shot a red dot the whole time without it falling off my pistol because I didn't mount the right way was the other weekend shooting with Alex, and I pull out the first target, and I'm like, oh man, this thing's bouncing all over the place. Have my sights always done that? It's literally just dancing all over the target and everything, and I'm like, well, I guess this is good enough. I got time to make up, whatever. And it was the same thing. I was like, man, I thought I had a really good grip. I thought I had really good alignment and everything. And in reality, I'm chasing Tinkerbell all over all the targets, trying to make sure that I'm hitting.
Tinkerbell.
Like, yeah, that's all. Like, I'm just chasing the dot like a little firefly all over. And I'm like, I really suck. Like, I thought my grip and everything was super stable. In reality, it's just stable relative to what I was aiming with. So going back to the fundamentals, what I really think is yes, I do think that there's fundamentals, and yes, I do think that they apply, and yes, I think they apply all the time, but I think that it's weighted based on which fundamental you need more, right? Do you need perfect sight alignment to shoot a 3-meter target? No. But to shoot 8 3-meter targets in a row, do you need a really good grip? Yep. Does it matter if you slap the trigger? Not really. As long as you're holding onto that pistol for dear life and it's not moving, like, yeah, like, that's more of like a body presentation and just ride the lightning, hold on for dear life and make sure your rounds are coming out. But I mean, is your super important for a piece of steel out there at 50 meters if you only have to put 1 round on it? No, but your sights are probably a little more important. So I think that yes, the fundamentals are always applied, but I think that they're balanced and weighted differently. So it's constantly like a fluctuation between, do I need to death grip this thing and hold on, or do I need to have a little more balance in my life and make sure my sights are actually where I want as the trigger's breaking? Do I prep the trigger? What if I over prep the trigger? Is that okay? So, yeah.
That's really good, because some of the things that was sticking out into my brain was, again, there's misconceptions, misperceptions about a whole bunch of different things. But even, for example, KD course slow fire. When I really started getting into kind of the quote unquote way of the gun about things, I realized, again, this was after sniper school and after doing a couple CQB courses as well. It's okay, during a slow fire, you have 5 minutes to 5 minutes is a long time to shoot 5 shots. And I actually had one of the range coaches get mad at me because I didn't break my shooting position to log into my data book where my rounds were impacting. And I had the argument, and I successfully was able to articulate to my argument. I'm like, I don't need to write it in the data book if I'm center mass. Point of aim, point of impact on my target. When that thing comes up and I get scored a 4 or 5 or whatever it is, I'm hitting. And the reality is, in my brain, I'm not going to have somebody down there shot spotting for me anyways. So I would have competitions with people. I'll be like, let's see how fast I can clear the slow fire. And I would literally clear the slow fire, my 5 rounds in a minute and a half. And it would get so bad to the point, because as soon as that target went back up, I was already taking slack out of my trigger and dropping the hammer, that I would have to have the sound shed, have them pull my target, because they weren't expecting the round to come back that quick. But I'm like, every time I broke my position, now I have to reset, and it's a different position. It's a different position than what it was in the one where I just nailed the target. And I would tell people that, again, I would get into arguments with range coaches and stuff like that. They're like, you can't be telling Marines to do that because it's not the fundamentals. Wait, whose fundamentals, right? And one of the big things, with Keeble, I went and did a couple of the qual courses with him for the air marshals, and he put me through an exercise where he to find where the wall was on my trigger. Right.
Yep, confirm roll. I know that one. Yep.
And just keep on going until finally, you have failure, which is basically the gun goes off without me intending it to go off. Right now, it's pointed in a safe direction. I'm aimed in on the target, so it's not it's a negligent discharge or something like that. But it's to really stress that, where is my trigger at? And again, that's another quote unquote fundamental that they tell you, that the break of the rifle, the pistol, the weapon system should surprise you when you're shooting. And then again, that was a lesson learned for me, is no, it should not surprise you. You should be so intimately aware of your weapon system that you know exactly when that thing is going to break. And again, it's for those, there is different types of shooters. If I'm shooting just to be able to qualify because it's my annual requirement or whatever, okay, that's one thing. And it's not to say that there's a different set of rules, but again, to a certain degree, it is a different set of application, I think, of that tool. And I think that's what makes a difference. So yeah, I'm going to want a stable shooting position and, muscle relaxation, bone support, so on and so forth. But how do I achieve that when I'm moving? Or one of the things like Russ Dean would say all the time, yeah, that's great. Point of aim, point of impact, sight picture, so on and so forth. But I've never been shot at by sidestep and silhouettes. In real life, the target will be moving, right? In real life, you're going to be moving. Sniper school, like everybody always gets those getting in the prone and how good can I shoot in the prone? In real life, I think I've taken maybe 5 shots, real shots in a prone position. All the other shots that I took as a scout sniper in the Marine Corps in combat were in some kind of modified, non-standard, effed up position that if somebody were looking at that, they would have been like, oh, that's totally not fundamental. Well, what's the fundamental? I have no choice but to get myself wedged into this position, because either I do that and have a chance at taking the shot, or I don't get the shot at all.
And now they call it PRS.
Yeah, and that's why I really like that aspect of the competition shooting, because seeing dudes and gals do things where I saw one, I think it was one of your videos, Alex, like I saw you take like 3 shots in a row and you were actually standing on one foot. You were in the middle of movement and you were on your weak foot taking shots, but you drilled it.
I'm a bottom heavy person, so it's easy for me. But there was exactly a match when I shot in Benning, right? I was like, this is my first season. I'm not really gunning for first top 3. I placed pretty decent, but there was a position I went into this like really weird looking freaking not even prone. It was like I don't even know what you call it, but I was like, there's a video of me somewhere, but I literally did it because I didn't want to get my jersey dirty. Everyone else was dropping to the phone, and I got.
He would have broke back kneeling, but he didn't put his head on the ground. That was the difference. It's a shooting position we teach, the broke back kneeling. If you're behind a tire to shoot underneath the vehicle, you just didn't put your head on the ground.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I almost did that, but I also didn't.
See, it is a thing.
Okay. And you stay clean. Yeah.
Hey, I hit the targets though.
Yeah.
Barely. But freaking we gotta go on, man. Very interesting.
I did that. That was all I had. Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of good. I'm shooting from the hip now. Again, pun intended. So for the few people that are watching, we got tons of puns for days, shooting puns. Really, I was never really a real sniper. I read a lot of Stephen Hunter books. So. But it was funny. So I will throw this guy under the bus because I can't stand him.
I already know what's
formerly Sergeant Major Kenneth Lovell got forced retired because he lied about his background, but that's a whole nother story. He was this Cody shooting dad jokes. That's perfect. But so we were in a position. We were on the rooftop, and for me it was tough as a team leader and a sniper. I had a designated marksman and a sniper in my team, and even though I was a sniper, I always believed that there's not that much opportunity unless we're in a static position for me to really do that role, because it's a very specific role, and I can't lead. This was my belief. I can't lead and also be a sniper at the same time. I'm either a team leader, and I use my team as a weapon system and employ them, or I'm a sniper and I focus on that weapon system and employ that, right? So, and there may be some that would disagree with me, and that's fine. But then first sergeant level came up on the rooftop, and the first mistake he made, since I brought up Stephen Hunter, was he told us about how that movie Shooter? We're like, yeah, the one with Mark Wahlberg. He's like, yeah, that was based on me and my time at Yankee White and this, that, and the other. And it was like, that was my first negative counseling there in country from him, when I told him yeah, first sergeant, we can all read. And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, that movie Shooter is based on the book Point of Impact by Stephen Hunter. And there's a whole series of books where Bob Lee Swagger's in it. And so, yeah, that was not good. But then he comes up on rooftop watch one day and he's like, hey, you mind if, because things were starting to get kinetic, and basically he wanted to get behind my gun for, you know, obvious reasons, because he had visions of probably a bronze star in his head. But he gets behind the weapon system and he's like, hey, so, you know, talk me through this, because he had never seen a M110 SAS or been behind one before. And I said, nope, hey, you don't have to worry about the dope. I do have a dope chart on the side of my gun on the buttstock, but I have it set for max point blank at 500 yards. And so snipers, I don't care when you were a sniper or whatever, you know what max point blank is. And when I told you it's set for 500 yards, I know that, hey, that crosshair, if my target's, you know, anywhere within that range, I put those crosshairs center mass. If it's within that range, then it's going to hit it at 500 yards. And so he's like, okay, well, I see something over here. I'm setting it for 200. And I see him adjust my parallax knob.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, hey, first sergeant, you don't need to do that. All you have to do is aim higher by, you know, 1 mil dot and you'll be good. And he'll be like, wait, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, first of all, the parallax that's parallax. And then he goes into this diatribe with me about, you know, how, well, when I went through sniper school, I learned on the M40A1 and we had the unirdal and so on and so forth. And I was like, right, First Sergeant, so did I. But the thing is parallax is parallax. And, you know, one thing that hasn't changed with scopes is that your elevation is the top turret, your windage is the right turret. So anything extra is going to be like, for example, the ocular lens, that's your, you know, magnification, what power you're shooting at. And that left little turret right there, that's your parallax. Because, you know, on one hand, I'll hand it to him like, okay, you know, we had to, going back to your comment about scope tools, Matt, like, yeah, we had to set our unirdal scope for a combat zero of, you know, we set it for 300 yards parallax, which sucked if you were shooting past 300 yards, because now you had parallax. You had to have a much more stable shooting position because parallax came into play. When we got these new scopes, whether it was the Schmidt and Bender or when US Optics bought that and so on and so forth, like having a parallax knob is huge, right? And even like my understanding of going back to iron sights, like how much can parallax affect you on iron sights? Enough if the, you know, the shooting is that critical. Whereas like having a parallax free optic, like a red dot, like that for me was the other big thing is like, okay, so I got my red dot here. And even if I move my head like this, the dot, like the position of the weapon system of where that dot's aimed doesn't move. And that's a bit of a trip to me the first time, you know, when you're seeing that stuff. But it's just amazing to me if you had have told me 20 years ago that we were going to have weapons, I mean, I would have thought you were talking about like ray guns or whatever, like Marvin the Martian came down and issued us new weapon systems. It's just blown my mind. But I don't think that changes. Like, yeah, the technology may be getting better, but I don't think that changes the level of skill that these guys have within the competition shooting world, or, you know, even in the higher level shooting for combat skills like you're teaching, Matt. Like, going back to the argument about fundamentals, what are the fundamentals? I think the fundamentals are really understanding your tool. What's its limitations? What's its capabilities? Understanding your limitations, your capabilities, and how do you now take all these different variables? That's why I say it's like calculus. You're adding in a shit ton more variables aside from just, you know, trigger control, muscle support, relaxation, muscle relaxation, bone support, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, screw that guy setting the parallax knob like, oh yeah, no, I have it set for 200. No, you don't.
Man, I'm currently trying to get, I'm trying to see what's going on over at the match here. I'm gonna walk to the side real quick. I'm gonna leave you guys together for a second. I'll be right back. All right.
All right, no problem, bud. So, all right, Matt. So let's, while we're waiting for Alex to kind of figure all that out, because you know what they say, no plan survives first contact.
Yeah.
So you were talking about fast, because I remember the Fast Marines too when I first joined the Corps, because we had a whole bunch of them.
Better than it used to be, but we're still working on it. But.
Well, it's a job. I think that people don't realize too. Like, there's a lot of different things that fall within the ground combat arms MOSs, specifically within the infantry in the Marine Corps, that it's just like, oh, that's a thing. And it's like, yeah, that's a thing. There's a lot out there. Same thing, like, you know, security forces, you know, my first team leader that I had, he was at Kings Bay and he was at security forces, and just hearing some of the things that, like, the different training that he got to have and how important that job was, but he was still a grunt. You know what I mean? It's just different. So what was it like for you when because you brought up a little bit, hey, I went back to the infantry, decided that, you know, you made the comment like, hey, I was done babysitting, but what was it that, like, managed, like, did you hear about a screening for the state platoon, or what was it that tipped you over that, like, you know what, I can do this, I'm going for this?
So it was actually, I don't know if you know him. He's actually the course chief for IULC West right now, but Lloyd Vermillion. He used to be
the name.
Yeah, crazy dude, right? He came in like 98, and then he got out, went to college to be like a dance major for a couple of years, and was like, oh, this isn't for me, and then came back, which, like, if you know Lloyd, that makes complete sense. But so I was in security forces for a little bit, and I hit the fleet eventually. And of course, like, the day I showed up, I was already a corporal. I was like a 2-year corporal, which, I mean, at the time was kind of crazy because we got an extra 100 points on our cutting scores. And I mean, rolling into the fleet when I had a bunch of Lance Coconuts running around that, like, had done a MU for a couple months and thought they knew all that. It was obvious points of contention right at the start. But Lloyd was super about, hey, check it out. If you know what you're talking about, it is what it is. But if you don't, ask and we'll send you somewhere. I'll give you the answers. So, I mean, that was really something that as soon as I showed up, like, I knew if I didn't know my stuff, like, that was it. You know, like, there was no hiding in the cracks. So he sent me to AIC, or was it ISLIC, or whatever it was at the time before they changed it. And that kind of saved me. I was supposed to go on the MU. I ended up going on the MU. But before I went, I was talking to him, and I was kind of like, hey, like, I don't know, as like a squad leader, if, like, this is the fit for me. Like, I like leading dudes. I like taking care of guys. I like teaching them things. But, like, I don't know if me calling a kid on Saturday morning to make sure he's in his barracks room because, like, he's a 21-year-old man, that I need to babysit him and, like, make sure. Or, like, I don't know that I need to go watch this kid brush his teeth because dental said they didn't brush his teeth, if that's, like, what I want to be doing with my life. So I was talking to him and everything. He's like, hey, man, why don't you go to ANS? Why don't you go to MARSOC? Why don't you go try something else? And I was like, yep, all right, cool. So I put in my package to go to ANS in 15 or 16, I would say. And basically came up to, I went toe-to-toe with my sergeant major as a corporal, which went about as well as he could because he didn't want me to go because we needed NCOs in the unit and something about BICs. And we were short for the MU, and somehow that worked out to, he wouldn't approve for me to go, even though he couldn't stop me. The recruiter wouldn't pull me because he didn't want to build a bad relationship. And he was like, hey, you go on the MU. I picked up sergeant. You go on the MU, you come back, wherever you want to go, I'll sign it. So I went on the MU, ate terrible chow for a couple, what was that, like 9 months with Alex. And I came back and then tried to go again. And I was like borderline anemic because there was like no iron in the food on shit. Yeah, you're NPQ'd. You got to wait 6 months and da-da-da-da-da. I was like, whatever. Lloyd Vermillion, whenever he was the platoon sergeant for snipers at the time, he's like, come run the screener, run the indoc, whatever they wanted to call it. We'll spin you up. You'll get like some training. You'll be working a lot more. Basically, like you'll be on your own program. You want to stay, you stay. If you want to get out of this place and go do something better, like go on. Like it's basically your opportunity to kind of do what you want. And then I hit the platoon, ran my screener, and I was like, this is awesome. You know, like I actually get to work with everybody that like wants to be there, like wants to come in and train, and everybody knows their job and wants to do their job every single day. And it's not like I have to sit there and hold this kid's hands because he didn't lace up his boots the right way. Instead, it's like, hey man, I need you to load 4 150s, get the tough book ready. I need you to pack out everyone's chow, and everyone gets this much ammo. You're pulling this system. So like, all right, ready. We leave in an hour, break. And it just happened. So it was definitely like that side of it that kind of like pulled me in. And I was like, that's what I wanted to do originally. Like I like working with small units that like want to be there and want to train. So that's really what pulled me in and kind of like kept me there for a while.
Which schoolhouse? When you went through sniper school, which schoolhouse did you go to?
First or second time. I dropped by 1 point on KD. Nick Fears. I went through East Coast. So let's see. It was Gunny Pennington at the time for the first run with Davis, Kelleher. All those guys were still there. Fears was there. And then I went back. So I dropped for KD and then went back to the next run. And it was East Coast again. But by that time, it switched over to who was it? It was before Gunny Tice. I forget. Damn.
Yeah. Well, and I went through on Stone Bay at Hathcock Range.
Oh, yeah.
So you have Quantico, and then you have I don't know. I assume they're still running sniper school out of Stone Bay. I don't know. Marsoc kind of took that whole area over. So.
Or it's in Geiger now. So they put it at the AITB building. It's basically next to remember the EOD buildings tucked in the back corner. It's all the way to the back corner. They have like a new building. It's really nice.
Good for them. Yeah, that's awesome. But no, there's nothing wrong with going through the long course. I did that for Amphib Recon School. I got hurt on my first time up, and back then there was no like getting recycled. Like there was a good chance if you got dropped for whatever reason, didn't matter whether it was performance based or like you got injured. There was a good chance you would, because when I went over, I was on basically battalion orders, so it's like being fapped out, temporary duty. So there was good, like nobody wants to go back to their unit with their tail between their legs, like, yeah, I didn't make it, whatever. So I lucked out and I got to, go back, and second time through I finished it. But yeah, that was rough. Those long courses are, that really tests your will to, okay, am I going to see this thing through? And it's like, yep, whatever. And then I became an instructor, and I realized very quickly as an instructor pushing students through that I basically went through basic recon course like 20 times because you're doing everything with the students. And again, it's funny how to me these things work. It's like perspective is everything. If you're in the mindset, in the perspective that this sucks, this is terrible, whatever, this is the worst, whatever, then it's going to be that for you. Whereas
honestly, feeling the first time was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because that was like the first time that, like, especially in the Marine Corps, like it's always like 80% gravy. Like, yep, here we go. You're just going to go through the pipeline, and like you can fail, but you're just going to retest. And like that was the first time where I like legitimately had to do something hard. And we didn't shoot Stone Bay. We didn't get to shoot on the golf course. We had to go shoot up at it was a reserve base up northwest of Durham, Camp Butner, which is in the middle of nowhere. And I mean that's probably the hardest range to this day I've ever shot, because you'd be sitting there at like the 500-yard line, and there's a road that cuts through it, and if you don't catch the switch like as it happens, you're holding 0.2 off left edge, and all of a sudden you're 0.4 off right edge. Like it's a crazy course of fire. But yeah, like failing the first time was like the first time that I ever was like, oh, I like legitimately failed something. Like this is actually hard, because I mean, let's be real. Like the Marine Corps is not hard. Like it's not difficult necessarily. Like obviously
it's as hard as you make it.
But yeah, it's like you can get out of it what you get out of it. But like if you don't want to be honor grad and you don't want to be top shot, like if you want to be the 80%, like it is really easy. Like it's not designed to fail necessarily. And that was like the first time that like I actually tried on something and like practiced really hard, and I was like, oh, I didn't make it. Okay, well I can either go back to the line companies, or I can go be like a terminal pig as like a sergeant, or I can, practice, figure it out, study up, and then come back and hit it again. And I mean, the second time I got through school, like, I'm not gonna say it was a breeze, but like I literally was there to get a check in the box. Like I already knew everything I needed to know. I was already spinning up. The second time I went to school, I spotted for 7 other dudes during UKD because their spotters couldn't keep up. And so I'm sitting there literally behind the glass, and like I'd shoot, and And then the next relay, I'd have 7 shooters lined up, and I'm making their win calls for all of them and calling the shots for everything. And it was just kind of like, I was like, this is what it's supposed to be.
UKD is what almost got me. Unknown distance.
Yeah.
It almost got me. Because for me, it was just where I was having it goes back to that process thing that Alex was talking about, was like I hadn't dialed in my process for, speed over accuracy. Because that's the other side of unknown distance. It's like, well, yeah, you'll start getting your hits and you'll be extremely accurate with your shots. But if you take too long doing it, well, then you don't get the rest of your shots, and those aren't alibis. And so that's what was getting me, was it wasn't the accuracy side, it was the time. So then once I've, got my process down, and the other thing is like really trusting your spotter. Not that I didn't trust my spotter, but like you were just talking about too, like spotting is the most important part of sniping. Without good data, without good information, and doctrinally, the spotter was the senior sniper, doctrinally. But of course, then that changes. So, okay, yeah. So, I guess you got on the phone, Alex. So they're doing their walkthroughs now.
Yes, the shooting is gonna be starting shortly.
Okay, cool. Unfortunately, I might have to jump, guys, because I got dad duties.
No, I hear you. I'm probably got to jump here in like the next half hour. I gotta do my week prep because I've got a full course still going on. So
nice.
How long is the course, Matt?
For SFTC, the one I'm currently teaching, which is like the renamed BSG, I think we're pushing. Was it 8 weeks? 8 weeks, I think now. Yeah. But I mean, they do everything. So like it used to be a lot more of, I think it was like 6 weeks and 3 weeks of working like machine guns and not even non-lethal. It was like machine guns and marksmanship and stuff like that. And then 3 weeks of tactics and interior guard things like checking ID, stuff like that. And now it's 8 weeks and they do like a little bit of interior tactics, a little bit of marksmanship, a little bit of non-lethal weapons training. They get OC sprayed. It's much more of kind of covers all the bases as it used to.
Yes, OC spray.
Oh yeah, that's scary. Everybody comes out and watches them, and everyone's a hard PFC until you get some devil pee in your eye, and then all of a sudden everyone's upset. So yeah.
Well, then you meet the couple of mutants that like it doesn't affect them at all, and they're just like they put that stuff on their burrito, and they're like, yeah, this is nothing.
My favorite's the ones that's like the delayed reaction, like, oh, this isn't even bad, and then they hit like the last station, and then they're like just out of nowhere. Yeah.
Yep, and the water, I swear the water bucket is a trick.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yep, I've been OC sprayed and tasered a few times, and that's... the thing about the taser I never liked was having the barbs taken out. Because that was the nice thing about tasers, like, you get hit, and yeah, it sucks while you're riding the lightning, but then once it's done, it's done. It's over, but...
You don't have to worry about the shower later.
Yeah, OC spray sticks with you.
Yeah.
So I could make another couple comments, but it probably wouldn't be appropriate for YouTube land. But
that's right. So, well, what we're gonna do is I think I'll take the helm for this. I'm gonna stand by for the feed to come in. It's the first stage of the morning. Usually after that gets going, everything starts to get real good. So I'm gonna put us. I'm gonna loop the teaser video up until we can get that feed. But freaking, this was I tremendously enjoyed these conversations.
All right, cool, man. Yeah, well, till next time. We are gonna try to do more of these. And again, Alex hit me up and said, hey, we got this shoot going on. Let's see if we can throw this up live and do whatever. So we're still kind of figuring out these processes for how we do these different things, but we'll definitely get better at them. And for everybody that did jump on and watch and participate in the comments and stuff like that, like we appreciate that too. So make sure you like and subscribe hit the little bell notification button. The likes are great. Thumbs down work good too, because that allows us to adjust fire, but it still helps with the analytics as long as you don't ratio us. But
this is where you go. If you've ever forgotten how to shoot after the beep, hit like and subscribe.
I prefer to swipe up to see more, but that's okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and throw this up, and then we'll stand by for when the shooting starts. All right, guys?
All right.
All right.
Wait. Hold on. Cool.
There we go.
There it is. Let's see what's going on, guys. All right, here we go. He's about to start. I think it's actually Mike Welch.
Yes, it is.
That's Mike. I think that's Rick on the timer based off of his kicked out stand.
Correct. Rick is on time. Juan's on score.
Hey, Juan. He made it.
Good old Juan.
All right. Ooh. That's Mike. All right. Hunting in the middle of the range. It's so cool. Look at that. Oh, this is a long ass stage. Excuse me. This is a very long stage. For like. You want to skip it now? Hey. All right.
Range is clear. Time 4358.
All right, 4358.
Yeah, I'll probably get that one.
Oh, let me see Mike's face.
You got like 2 extra shots on that first target.
All right, so Mike Welch,
Mike. You got Alex on the line.
One of the coolest dudes in the world. And he's looking at his hits.
Oh, dude.
No way.
One mic.
Just a bit outside.
Oh, man. Ask Alex.
Alex, what do you think?
Hey, you're the RO over there. Pull the overlay out. But
We'll call it.
Mike Foley.
Mic.
What is it? Mike Foley.
It's a mic.
That little guy? Don't worry about that little guy.
These ones got him anyways. All right, so it's 2 alphas.
All right, man. So I'm gonna take a break, and I'll live back in a couple of shooters.
All right, cool.
All right.
I've watched one mic.
That was fun to watch. That is every freaking match. It's awesome. Awesome. So one of the stages run. I think what we're gonna do is I'll stand by for another stage, but I think what the competitors on RSF are probably going to be doing is put like the stages together for like an after action video or just like a compilation. So at least we're able to see something. Probably the video after this, Lynn. What do you think?
Yeah, well, and so here's the thing. I think this would be good for those who are watching this. Like, yeah, we covered a lot of ground, talked about a lot of stuff while we were waiting just to see that. But I think that is a good, I guess an example of all those things and so much more is what it takes to go into that. And he did that. What was his time for that stage?
43 seconds, something.
Yeah, so 43 seconds. So we talked for an hour and 40 minutes about things involved with this, some not, but in general, just the kind of mindset and education and training and visualization and all those different things that are going on for 43 seconds. And so many things had to happen and go right. And then you could see there too in the background, like, okay, yeah, Joey's videoing it, but then you've got line safety officers, you've got other people that are watching to make sure that things are safe. And like you said, like that was a long stage, man. He moved. I don't know. It's kind of hard to see because he had his cell phone vertical when he was filming it, but I mean, that looked like a solid 120 yards of movement total.
For sure.
To me. I don't know. Matt, will you want to weigh in on that one? How far do you think that was? Use your calibrated sniper
I'd
eye.
say it looks about 75, maybe 100 meters. But one thing I did notice, Alex, how many rounds did he shoot on every target?
It was 3 rounds.
3 rounds? Okay.
I think that
I
was.
remember last time we had a stage together, and it was 3 rounds on a target. How many did you put on all those targets?
Hey, okay, so that run was beautiful. Okay, I ran the run. I was like, pop, 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 blend, pop, 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 pop. All right, cool. Friggin', there's
Oh man, that was probably my favorite stage we ever shot together because he was flying through this stage, and in the brief it was like 3 rounds per. It was like a USPSA outlaw carbine sandwich match thing. We're flying through it at New Holland, and Alex gets done. He's got this huge smile on his face because he's flying through it. My time's definitely the fastest. And we're like standing there looking at him, we're like, Alex, how many rounds per target was that? He was like, 2. I'm like, oh no. Yeah.
Well, but that does bring up too, like cadence. Like cadence is an important thing, and now we can start getting into real depth of things like talking about reactionary gap and things like Hicks-Hyman law, and how, based on the choices that I have, based on time, distance, speed, of how long does it take for me to make decisions. And so when you're looking like Hicks' law versus Hyman's law, and then when Hicks-Hyman together, you're looking at a logarithmic equation of, all right, here's my constants. For example, say I'm coming from the holster, right? How many steps it takes for me to come from the holster? How fast is my draw speed? And then does it take for me to register my target, put rounds on the target? How long does that take? And then compare that to a real life situation. Well, what's the average speed that a human being can move over that period of time, and how much distance can they cover, which is why you have things like the 21-foot drill and stuff like that. So when you're thinking about that, or, there's a video that I show in the class that I teach where you see it's an officer involved shooting in a traffic stop. And as the vehicle's driving away and the officer's still shooting at the vehicle, you hear the cadence of his rounds as it starts opening up as the vehicle gets further and further away, right? Because he's mentally, without even thinking about it, slowing down to make sure to try to, and you see where that distance changed the cadence of how many rounds he's shooting. So you want to talk about getting into depth into things. Like that was a thing that I noticed when Matt was shooting, like his cadence stayed consistent with his rifle. And it even seemed to me, and I would have to see it again or hear it, I should say, but it almost appeared as if he held some of the same cadence with his pistol until he had to start moving and added in that extra step to get clear line of sight for some of those other harder to reach targets. You could hear a difference in the cadence. And that's something that's real subtle, but like, I think a calibrated eye like yours, Matt, or even for you, Alex, too, like, when you guys are doing like shooting clinics, like that's one of the things that I know you've been working on, Alex, but you're going to do more of like in a video kind of format like this. But okay, I don't want to exceed somebody's channel capacity when I'm trying to give them corrections, right? So what I would do when I was training civilians in firearms is, okay, here's the biggest things that I saw that they could adjust with, whether it was their in this case, we're talking about cadence or their grip or whatever it is. So I'm going to give them those 1 or 2 things and not worry about the other stuff. Get them to focus on those 1 or 2 things. Then once they fix that problem, now they can move over and start working on some of these other smaller problems. So I look at the biggest problem first. I address that, get that thing under control, and then move to the next one. Because I think the reality is, and like, you were talking about, whatever your visualization was, whatever your plan was for that match, your brain was set on 2 rounds. And it was so strong that it overrode all that, and you didn't realize it until then. Your partner's like,
Yeah. That was,
He still beat me on that stage too. Just to put that one out there, I put 3 rounds on target, and Alex still beat me on that. So,
You know, I like that when you said when you were talking about the biggest problem, because I always speak in terms of like what's your lowest hanging fruit. You attack that tree, bottom up, and I think the fun part on that is like going back to like the beginning of our conversations. Like, okay, you got somebody's lowest hanging fruit. Now you've identified it. How do you speak in his language? How that works? Like literally, I've for some more experienced guys, I've explained the match conduct and how your mental state is. I actually told them, all right, cool. Now you're at a match, right? You're not training anymore. You're not pushing. It's not metal. It's not bossa nova. It can be bossa nova. It's not like a lullaby. It's somewhere in between, like a symphony, or maybe a little bit towards the Richard Wagner side, because it's a little bit more brash. But there's a certain balance in what your mental state goes through, and instead of like going through like the million different ways to describe something, I asked the guy, "Hey, do you listen to music?" It's like, "Yep." What's your favorite music to relax to? It's like, piano music. All right, cool. You know orchestras, symphonies? And he's like, "Yep." All right, cool. Think about that real quick. And then I put the timer on him, hit the buzzer, and everything just like balanced out. Like, and he actually told me a couple days ago he shot the Western Nick mix, and he literally listened to. He played music. He listened to like instrumentals and some orchestra stuff in between stages, and he actually shot. He told me it was like one of his most consistent matches ever. And I was like, "Oh wow, I worked harder than I thought it would." Like, oh yeah.
Fun fact, Alex, growing up in school, I was a first chair violinist.
Oh gosh,
Believe it or not.
I was an 8th chair trumpeter, and that's because I didn't practice or really care. But I was, yeah.
I have double pedals on my electronic drum set.
Yeah, I noticed. Yeah, you changed the view on your camera, Alex, because last night when we were doing our test run, I saw your drums back there.
Yeah.
How long you been playing drums?
Casually since high school, like not super technically, like the complete opposite of shooting for me. Like everything is just, I'm gonna listen to like some song and just play along to it. No, nothing crazy. But yeah. So
Cody had a question for you, Matt. He said, when were you a security force instructor?
I am right now, currently. So I get out January 1st. So if anyone's hiring, January 1st I get out, but I'm trying to move up to DC because the wife has orders up the Navy Yard up there. So we're trying to move up in May. So I have been here since 2 years ago. So yeah, I guess 2020, end of 2019 until now. It's a good gig. I like it. Set hours, you know when you're going to the field, when you're going to be home, when you have to go to work.
You're within driving distance of Quantico practical shooters. Like,
yeah. I mean, as far as the competitions around the area, I mean, right here, I'm in Virginia Beach area, Chesapeake, Norfolk. So I mean, like 2.5 hours from Quantico, 2.5 hours from Sir Walter and Raleigh and all those clubs, and Frontline's like 2.5, 3 hours. And I mean, it's pretty much in like the mid-Atlantic area, if I want to shoot any kind of different match, I mean, it's, within the day's driving distance, it's really pretty nice for the setup. Like Steel Challenge, 22s, yeah, PRS, Gas Gun Series. I like the spot right here, so yeah.
Nice. Well, I don't know if you guys could hear it in the background, but I call her the toddlerist. She's a cross between a toddler and a terrorist. Just depends on which side she leans more towards on the particular day. But I could hear her running around, so I'm going to have to jump just so that I can help the missus out with that. But I appreciate the opportunity to jump on with you guys. Matt, it was great to meet you, man.
Yeah, good.
I'm sure we'll be talking more in the future. Alex will send you my contact info, so I'm pretty easy to find. So, but yeah, man. And Cool. Alex, you got any safe rounds for me before I jump?
No, I'm just gonna. Well, I think just to make sure Joey isn't too bogged down over there because he is directing the match. We'll take the footage. We'll put it in a nice little package. I'll help him out with that, and then we'll get to see the match like full on. I think this whole conversation here was actually a show in itself. So hopefully that helps out a bunch of people listening, because I tell you what, I look for stuff like this whenever I surf the net looking for something to work out to.
There you go. Let's start a podcast. Get sponsored, make some money.
Well, what we'll do too is we'll try to scrub through it, Alex, and we'll put in the description. We could put timestamps for like different topics if you guys identify like through the course of what we were talking about, like specific little blurbs of topics that people might want to search for, and that's one good thing that we could do. So we'll try to get that put together. We got more things coming up with Recon Sniper Foundation. We got Raywall Ranch around the corner, which is a retreat. I don't have the information on that right now, other than the fact of it will be held at Raywall Ranch. I think it's going to be the end of May, sometime, just because of weather. So that's something we've done every year. Mike Clancy set that up, and the Hatfields are gracious enough to let us use the venue. So it's a good chance for. I've been to it, and it will kind of allow you to kind of get that trigger reset, so to speak, for yourself. So that's a good thing we got coming up. I know there's some other matches coming up, Alex. We have to talk about Ohio Tactical Officers Association. Todd Mao, he hit me up about that. So we'll have conversations about that, but then we'll be able to put some stuff out for that. So a bunch of different things coming up. And we'll make sure to try to do a better job of like getting ahead of it, throwing it out on social media, so that those of you that want to watch it, see some of these things live or whatever, you can check them out. So, but all right, guys. Well, I'm gonna jump. It's been fun, and I will talk to you later.
All right, you guys take care.
See ya.